In today's video, we're going to be carrying on with our in-depth analysis of the power of now. Today is going to be chapter 3, so probably the first half of chapter 3, and then we'll continue the second half of chapter 3 in the next video, okay? If you're new or you haven't yet seen the first 2 chapters of this book, the breakdown that I did on those, you can check out my Power of Now playlist up here, and I would actually recommend going through it in chronological order. It will greatly help you. But let's start now with chapter 3, which is moving deeply into the now. So first and foremost, Eckhart says, don't seek yourself in the mind. Okay? The problems of mind cannot be solved on the level of mind. And this is something that I wanted to kind of just go into a little bit right off the bat, because on this path, many questions arise. Many things that you cannot find a logical answer to. Like somebody the other day just in my Facebook group, which also if you're not a part of, feel free to join. It's a free Facebook group for the community of Personal Mastery Quest. Someone asked in that group, you know, like how do you explain things happening like murder and all these things, right? And how can you put a positive spin to these things? They have nothing inherently positive about them. And so to those types of questions, there seems to be like no logical answer that you can come to the conclusion of. And that is quite literally because these sorts of questions, which require you to transcend the level of mind, they cannot be answered from the level of mind. Mind only knows positive, negative. Mind is very limited. It is a very personal, limited perspective. And you can never seek to grasp the truth with mind, right? It's almost like trying to measure the ocean with a ruler. It will just not work. So many of the questions that come up on this path must be simply just disengaged from, because when you disengage from them and you stay in the silence, stay in the presence, they eventually are answered from within. And this is not something that I'm just saying. You maybe have to take my word for it right now, but if you truly implement this, you will see this to be true for yourself. And then no longer will you ask idle questions, just mental questions. And so Eckhart right here is saying right away is not just with these questions, but also don't seek yourself in mind. It cannot be done, okay? And Eckhart says that, once you've understood the basic dysfunction of mind, you don't need to constantly be just studying on the mind, studying 50 different spiritual books and practices. You don't need to do studies on ego and all this stuff. You already understood the basic dysfunction of the mind, the identification with mind. So he said you have already understood the basic mechanics of the unconscious state, identification with your mind, which creates a false self, the ego, as a substitute for your true self, rooted in being. So the ego is all the identifications, right? The first identification is just this body, these thoughts. And now further off, the more you place belief, the more you place identification in these thoughts, the more you start to, go further off into your identifications, like your nationality, your race, your job position, how much money you make, your social status, all these things. We have so many identifications which now just cover up your very essence of being. And that is the basic dysfunction. As long as these are identified with, all these mental categories and categories of separation, then your being will always remain just hidden. And it will always seem elusive. Like you can't, you're hearing about it in these videos and everything, but like you just can't seem to get it, because it's not something to get. It is something to clearly just see. It's something to be that which you already are. When you remove belief in these identifications, even if you're just doing it for right now, letting go of carrying all these attachments, all these belief systems. Okay, so the more you fall into this identification, the more you become a branch cut off from the vine. Okay, so that's very, very powerful to know. And that is the basic dysfunction out of which all your problems come forth. And the solution to them does not lie in mind. mind will create a solution, and then that solution over time itself just becomes another problem. And that is life as you know it, the way we're conditioned to live. Real solutions happen by disengaging from the mind. They happen through a shift in consciousness, not by thinking one thought and replacing that thought with another thought. So Eckhart says, when you are present, you can allow the mind to be as it is without getting entangled in it. The mind in itself is not dysfunctional. It is a wonderful tool. Dysfunction sets in when you seek yourself in it and mistake it for who you are. It then becomes the egoic mind and takes over your whole life. So that's all he's saying. It's not to paint mind in a bad picture, not to make it the villain. However, if you place belief in the mind, if you identify with the mind, what is identification? It is believing that this is myself. And you don't consciously do this, but what is mind? It's just a bundle of thoughts. It's just thoughts, incessant thought activity. And when this thought arises, because it is so intimately felt, it is so here, and it is sensed as my voice, you place belief in it as me. And see, this is true for yourself. When thoughts arise, they are sensed to be me thinking. Me, it is my voice. And so there's an involvement that you have with mind as myself, as this is what I am. And this is what orchestrates all your activities. It is sensed. So that is the dysfunction. And what Eckhart is really proposing is to become present. And when you are present, you can allow the mind to be as it is, but no longer are you instilling it with yourself. No longer are you seeking yourself in it, and no longer are you mistaking it to be me. So now mind can be used for practical purposes and goal achievement and everything, and when it needs to be used, not just constantly throughout the day, because that's another aspect of ego identification, constant psychological thinking, because the ego needs that constant psychological thinking, this past and future, in order to maintain its sense of self. So once you're actually present, and once you're practicing staying present, being here, being aware of being, now mind can be used for practical purposes. Obviously it will. Just for example, like me making this video, putting the battery in and all that, and then editing and then uploading it, that is the working mind, which we'll get into more. That it continues to be. But the psychological mind is what we're taking full belief away from. And we're also no longer identifying with mind as thoughts, as me, as my voice. And this itself will free you of most of your problems. No longer will you make a problem out of everything. Because again, what makes a problem out of everything? What claims that everything is a problem? What suffers the problem or the situation? It is thoughts. So that is what you're freeing yourself from. That whole cycle of creating the problem, then suffering the problem, then seeking forever to solve the problem, believing that happiness will be found once you do. This is a cycle that will go on and on and on unless you see this dysfunction and just step away from it. And this is a power you have. So Eckhart says the way to end this delusion, right? End this chase, end this cycle, is by putting an end to psychological time, ending the delusion of time. So Eckhart says, here's the key. End the delusion of time. Time and mind are inseparable. Remove time from mind and it stops, unless you choose to use it. To be identified with your mind is to be trapped in time, the compulsion to live almost exclusively through memory and anticipation. And if you really take a look at all the thoughts, if you just consider it right now, every single one of your thoughts is either of past, right, memory, just thinking about past experience, or it is anticipation, expectation, the future. So it's just past or future. This is what we call psychological time. Your attention being in projection about past and future. Putting an end to time, being in the now, is also putting an end to mind. Mind can only be past or future, projection. It cannot be now. If your attention is here and now, if you are present, then notice that mind is automatically not. This is something to be experimented with and seen clearly. Because the more you see this, the more you will empower yourself, the more you will grow clear in this practice. It is not just becoming present for no reason. We're not just giving you another task. This is actual freedom from constant psychological thinking. All your thoughts, everything is about past or future. See this for yourself. And he says, the compulsion arises because the past gives you an identity and the future holds the promise of salvation, of fulfillment in whatever form. Both are illusions. That is a powerful statement. So mind, constantly avoiding the now, is keeping your attention in the past because it gives you a sense of identity of who I am, my story, my hardship, my suffering, my past, all that I've been through, right? There's such a great sense of self in all your problems and all your suffering and all that you've been through. I noticed for myself that so much, like when I was living unconsciously, so much of my sense of self I instilled in my problems, in my past illness, in what I've been through, all the hardships growing up. And all that is unreal. But the mind constantly derives a sense of identity from it. It fuels itself through just keeping your attention there. And then the rest of your other thoughts are about the future. That once I have this, or once this thing that I'm working so hard and just filling up my day with activity for, once I have achieved this or gotten this or attained this, then I'll be happy. I'll finally be fulfilled. I'll finally be worthy. And so literally life becomes a chase to redeem the past in some future in which you'll be happy. Covering up the now. And Eckhart says both past, from which you derive your sense of identity, and the future, from which you get a sense of, salvation, fulfillment, that I will one day be fulfilled, both are illusions. So the question that came up in the book, someone asked him, right? Without the sense of time, how can we function in the world? Time is so precious. You got to use it wisely. And Eckhart says, time isn't precious at all because it is an illusion. What you perceive as precious is not time, but the one point that is out of time, the now. That is precious indeed. So you see, what do you value most? What do you cling on to so much? What do you love? You love life. You love living. You're not even so attached to this body or these thoughts or all your identifications as much as you are clinging on to living. You love life. And that is from where your fear of death arises. But life is not in time. Time is a concept in life. Life is now. And the now is not a time. It is just what is. Now is a time. Now is the concept of now as time only comes in when you go take your attention and put it into memories or anticipation. Then the concept of now exists where it's like, okay, this was before, this is now, and this will be. But before that concept even comes, all that is right now. All that ever is right now. All that ever will be is just here now. And Eckhart says, life is now. There was never a time when your life was not now, nor there will ever be a time when it is not the now. Take a moment to acknowledge this. This is not something little. It is very simple, but it is not something little. It is very insignificant. It is very significant. Life is now, and it always has been the now. How many times are we just going to say this and then just live our life in mind again, in time? Recognize that life is only in the now, always in the now. And so let's learn to be here in the now. Let's learn to keep our attention in life rather than in projection about life. One allows you to stay in alignment with the harmony of the greater whole, and the other just continues to take you off into more and more illusions, further like distorting reality, further distorting life, and therefore causing suffering and pain. And not just creating it for yourself, but also others. Eckhart says, have you ever experienced, done, thought, or felt anything outside the now? Take a second to reflect on this right now. Do you think you ever will? Is it possible for anything to happen or be outside of the now? Every feeling, every experience, doesn't matter positive or negative, has happened right now. When everything is, it is now. Isness itself is now. What you sense as now is the timeless essence of your own very being. It is the footprint of consciousness, of your own very self, that is formless yet ever present. The key to the spiritual dimension. So Eckhart mentions how, the reason why some people love to engage in dangerous activities such as mountain climbing or car racing and so on, so many hobbies that we have that we love, like high intensity things, just things that make us feel alive. That's because these activities where a lot is on the line, or maybe like gambling or just these high stakes activities, they bring you to the now. They remove all the clouds, the layers and layers of mind of past and future. All these identifications are let go of for this moment because it requires your intense presence, right? To carry out, like mountain climbing, where a lot is on the line. If you make the wrong move, you can fall. So, we've grown so accustomed to, we've become so addicted to seeking this sense of just being fully here. But we seek it through external means by doing this or experiencing this. Even like people who constantly go out, and I was definitely one of those people in the past who go out and party and everything like that. And that's when they feel fully alive. But just like, all these substances and everything, that's because it brings them just to enjoying the now. It is those moments where they're no longer like ruminating over the past or their life or all these identifications or expecting some future. It is just like where they feel most alive. They're just allowing themselves to be here now. But, like we don't need to chase this beingness through external means, not by getting something or doing something or being with someone, or just filling up our life with these sorts of activities which force us to become present. You see, and it's funny how like the entire the entire motive of the mind is to do things which bring it back to nothingness. Because it is in those moments when you're not thinking, when mind is inactive, and that is when mind is actually most happy, when it is not, when it is no longer there. And even in another book, I don't have it here with me, but by Ramana Maharshi, Who Am I? Ramana says, happiness is the absence of mind. The mind seeks and the mind claims that this person or this achievement or this amount of money is bringing you happiness. But the happiness that is experienced when you achieve those things or gain those things is due to, because in those moments the mind just rests, because no longer are, in those moments of like achievement or getting something, are you chasing anything anymore? Are you projecting any suffering onto this moment? And because your mind is just at rest, it goes inward into its source. That is what you experience as happiness. Happiness and fulfillment are not coming from any achievement or anything that is outside of you. It is not a product of any external event or thing. It is what naturally arises. It is an aspect of your being that only is covered up by your chase for happiness. And so once you relax this, once you learn to keep your attention here, in the beginning, definitely, you will not, it won't be like, oh, I'm just happy now. But more and more, you will start to feel the joy of being. You will start to feel fulfilled. You will start to feel content and happy and peaceful. And you will start to truly recognize that all the dysfunction and discomfort and suffering and fear only exists in mind, in projection. In truth, in real life, all that actually exists is just this sense of contentment and peace. These are aspects of your true nature. And see this for yourself. And no longer will you need to constantly do things and create things and manifest things and chase people and things and achievements and money or prove yourself in order to feel fulfilled, in order to just let go of this chase for moments at a time. Because if you continue to seek this sense of fulfillment and happiness through external things, that is what we call the cycle of pain and pleasure, where the entire time you're chasing, which is pretty much 90% of your life then, is all just pain. It is just all waiting for the next moment. And then once you achieve something, right? Because that is the nature of mind. It will achieve eventually what it seeks out to achieve. That is the nature of mind. It creates things to accomplish, and then it accomplishes them. So nothing is stopping you from doing that. But see, if you're in this chase, then you're in pain the entire time you're chasing. And then when you achieve it, it brings you moments of happiness because the mind just rests, right? But soon, if you have not seen through this, if you have not started to practice this, if you've not seen through the illusion, then mind will come up again. And you will believe in it again. You will believe that this is me. And now it will project all sorts of things that this is needed, this is needed, this is no longer making me. It will create problems out of the very thing that you chased for your whole life. It will create problems out of the very person that you thought was the love of your life. And not, after you're married to this person, then everything is happy and everything's perfect. But the mind will create very problems from that relationship, because the mind, that is the nature of mind. It will create problems, create things to achieve, then achieve them, believing that happiness rests on the other side. But that is not the case. So in order to be free of this chase, you really have to practice, and you have to see through all these illusions that the mind paints. And again, the culprit of all this, the main dysfunction, is belief in mind, identification with mind. So Eckhart takes a moment to mention that, even all the spiritual traditions, all the religions, they really, in essence, they're pointing you to the now. They are all showing you that the now is the key to the spiritual dimension, to your own being. And he even quotes certain things from the Bible, like, take no thought for the morrow shall take thought for the things of itself. Or nobody who puts his hands on the plow and looks back at it is fit for the kingdom of God. Basically, they're just showing you that to not keep your attention in thoughts of tomorrow, the now, be here. This is what is. This isness, this aliveness is itself. Consciousness, God. So he who constantly is just wandering in projection, in identification, is not fit. And he even says that, the whole essence of Zen teachings, right, is to be so utterly, so completely present that no problem, no suffering, nothing that is not who you are in your essence can survive in you. In the now, in the absence of time, all your problems dissolve. Suffering needs time. It cannot survive in the now. That is a very major statement. And see it for yourself. Once you start to actually practice this and see for yourself that, once you are present, once you're actually here and now, there is no suffering. Even if you're in pain, but you're here, then you're not suffering the pain. Then pain is just another experience. It is just another sensation. but you do not suffer. Suffering is mental. Suffering, again, needs time. Here and now, it's just life as it is. Even if it's unpleasant, it itself takes care of itself. See this for yourself. And you may also want to watch a recent video I made on surrender, in which I teach you how to do this, allowing life to be as it is, and then allowing life to also unfold, and surrendering to the flow of life, making your living process much simpler. And Eckhart lastly just mentions a little on this. He says, there is no greater obstacle to God than time. Now, he starts talking a little bit about mind, and how when we live through mind, we're, again, just living in projection. He says the mind cannot know, he just gave an example. He said the mind cannot know the tree. It can only know facts or information about the tree. My mind cannot know you, only labels, judgments, facts, and opinions about you. Being alone knows directly. So see, this is also where, we've discussed in the previous videos, is when I teach you the acceptance method, and even like surrender, going with the flow. When I teach you that, I always say that keep your attention away from thoughts. What are thoughts? They are just judgments, labels, interpretations, analysis, projection about what the contents of life are. The contents, whatever currently exists within your awareness, are the contents of awareness. Mind only knows judgments and labels, like all these things about them, but it can never know them. Therefore, take your attention away from mind and actually just be here with what is. In doing so, you bring yourself in alignment with what is, with life, and you become one with life. When you go off into projection, you become a separate entity. You believe yourself to be separate from all that is, and therefore that is what you start registering in your system as fear, as anxiety, of being the separate individual that's temporary and will end. The more you learn to just be here, the more you will start to even recognize your oneness with all that is. So mind can only know about anything. It cannot know it. That is also why you cannot know the self through mind. Eckhart says, there is a place for mind and mind knowledge. It is in the practical realm of day-to-day living. However, when it takes over all aspects of your life, including your relationships with other human beings and with nature, it becomes a monstrous parasite. And that's very true. And that's what I said earlier on. The more you just start to be present and keeping your attention here, right? You may ask, like, Sunny, how am I going to achieve my goals? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do my day-to-day activities? That is what we call the working mind. The working mind still works. The working mind is what is keeping me talking here right now without much effort. What is just keeping your digestion going? What is keeping the fire burning, or here, like the sun rising? And the working mind does its thing, you see. The working mind does not need your constant involvement. Okay? The same thing that allows me to make this video or do something else, that allows all your movements, all your day-to-day movements. That's the working mind, and it continues to do its thing, regardless of you just being here now. What we put an end to is the psychological mind, which is constant ruminating and identification with doing this and feeling this and thinking this, and the one that takes ownership of your life, the one that claims you to be a separate entity. We're letting go of that. We're putting an end to that. So Eckhart says, make it your practice to withdraw attention from past and future whenever they are not needed. And most of the time, they are not needed. Step out of the time dimension as much as possible in everyday life. Start by observing the habitual tendency of your mind to want to escape from the now. Okay, and the moment that you realize that you are not present, in that moment, you are present as the consciousness. Whenever you are able to observe your mind, you are no longer trapped in it. So no matter how much you suck at this in the beginning, I know I certainly very much struggled in this in the beginning. Doesn't matter, just keep coming back. The more you just allow yourself to come back, don't be hard on yourself, the more you just allow yourself to practice, you will see that this process evolves very, very quick. And actually, in proportion to your earnestness, it will evolve in proportion to your willingness. Okay? So take your attention away from thoughts whenever you recognize that you have been thinking, and just be present, be here. And he says, notice also how often your attention is in the past or future. Don't judge or analyze what you observe, just observe it. So what you observe, don't further make interpretations on it. Just observe and let it be. Just by you recognizing certain things, becoming aware of them, the tendencies are broken or they become weaker. And Eckhart says, intense presence is needed, especially when certain situations trigger a strong reaction with a strong emotional charge, such as when your self-image is threatened, or a challenge comes into your life that, triggers fear, things go wrong, or an emotional complex from the past is brought up. So this is what we discussed in the previous chapter on pain bodies, right? When these sorts of emotional urges or charges just come forth. That is when intense presence is needed, because what they invoke in you is just instant identification, and then you dwell in past or future and make you project all sorts of things. So in that moment, sever the connection, be here. Take your attention away from projection and be here. Again and again and again. That is all that's needed. Identification with the mind gives it more energy. Observation of the mind withdraws energy from it. Identification with the mind creates more time. Observation of the mind opens up the dimension of the timeless. Recognize that each time that you observe the mind, you are recognizing yourself to be prior to the mind, before the mind, deeper than the mind, subtler than the mind. So take a second to recognize this right now. What you are in essence is subtler than the mind, than the thoughts which have no form. Therefore, you must even be subtler than the thoughts which have no form. That means that you don't have form. That means you are even subtler than form. Already. It's not something you're becoming. See, it's very, very logical. Only because you are subtler and prior to the mind can you observe the mind. Can you see the mind come and go? So every single time you observe the mind loses power, loses its ability to pull you into identification with it, and just becomes weaker and weaker. And with it goes past and future too, and suffering too. All in one, you see. Many birds with one stone. So in terms of, using working mind versus psychological mind, Eckhart says, if you set yourself a goal and work toward it, you are using clock time, like working mind. You are aware of where you want to go, but you honor and give your fullest attention to the step that you are taking at this moment. If you then become excessively focused on the goal, perhaps you are seeking happiness, fulfillment, or a more complete sense of self in it, the now is no longer honored. And the now just becomes reduced to a mere stepping stone to the future with no intrinsic value. And so you basically denounce the meaning of life. You kind of neglect life itself in order to live in projection about what you want life to be, or something that you're chasing. And this is, most people living in the world today constantly just chasing their goals, which there's nothing wrong with pursuing a goal. That will happen always naturally, even if you're here and now present. But the most important aspect of your goal is not the fulfillment of it, but rather the current step, whatever that may be. currently, this is the only thing that matters in my life. And I'm here fully with you. And right now, if you're watching this, this itself is also the only aspect of your entire life that matters. Nothing else in your life matters other than me and you being here right now. And once you start to actually acknowledge this and start living in this way, every single moment, no matter how mundane or repetitive or simple, becomes extraordinary, becomes the very avenue for your sense of happiness and fulfillment. It is always the now. So in this way, this happiness is always available to you. So no matter what goal you're pursuing, recognize that happiness is not in the future. And recognize that if you are neglecting being here in the now, then you're missing the whole point of life, the whole point of the journey. If you're living in that chase, then your life's journey is no longer an adventure, just an obsessive need to arrive, to attain, to make it. And many people towards the end of the life, when they see the end approaching, that is when they start recognizing, damn, I just spent my life chasing all this stuff that I thought would make me happy and neglected everything in the now, neglected everything that actually was, neglected life. So lastly, we'll just end it off here today with Eckhart saying, he said, let me say it again. The present moment is all you ever have. There is never a time when your life is not this moment. This is not just a statement, it is a fact. It is not an observation, it is just fact. So recognize this for yourself. Contemplate on everything that we spoke of today. Meditate on it. And practice being here now. And don't practice this 5 minutes from now or plan to practice it tomorrow. Just do it right now. Because even tomorrow is an idea in the now. Live by this and you will see there are no problems. You will see that you cannot suffer. For to suffer, you must step back into time, back into mind. Okay? So again, if you haven't yet seen the other videos that I've done on this, make sure to watch that playlist. I'll link it down below, and also, it's in the cards for this video. But I really hope this video brought you value. I love doing this series, and I will continue doing it as well. Okay? So next time will be the part 2 of the chapter 3. Very good. Practice, practice, practice. Be well. I'll see you soon.